You ever have one of those moments where you realize you are probably seconds away from disappearing forever? Like, one tiny decision changes everything, because every story you are about to hear started out completely normal. A struggling comedian driving to a gig, three girls taking a cross-country road trip after bad breakups, a couple celebrating their engagement under the stars. Sounds harmless, right? Yeah, that's what they thought too. But somewhere out there, in the middle of nowhere, there are places where things just feel off. Tiny forgotten towns, abandoned farmhouses, empty roads that stretch for miles with absolutely nobody around. And the scariest part, it's never the place itself that gets you. It's the people hiding inside those places. The first story is about a broke stand-up comedian chasing his dream across state lines when a wrong turn stranded him near a town that felt completely dead inside. The people there didn't just stare at him, they watched him like predators watching prey. And what happened later that night on that dark road still messes him up years later. The second story starts like one of those carefree summer movies. Three friends healing from heartbreak, partying across America, sleeping under the stars, exploring abandoned places for fun. Until one stupid decision trapped them overnight with three masked strangers who didn't act human. And the final story, honestly, this one might be the most disturbing of all, because it proves that sometimes the most dangerous person isn't a random stranger. Sometimes it's somebody who already knows everything about you. Somebody who's been watching you long before you realize it. These stories aren't about ghosts. They're not urban legends. They're about real people, real roads, real terror. And every single one of them has the same horrifying theme: being alone in the middle of nowhere with the wrong person. About 15 years ago, back when gas was cheap and MapQuest directions were somehow considered reliable, I was in my early 20s chasing what I thought was going to be my big break in comedy. And when I say chasing, I mean barely surviving while driving across random states for 5 minutes on stage and maybe a free drink ticket if the club owner was feeling generous. I was one of those guys who peaked socially in high school without actually accomplishing anything. Total class clown. Could barely pass a test to save my life, but somehow I could make people laugh. And once you get that reaction from a crowd for the first time, dude, it hooks you. It's like a drug. Even bombing horribly somehow makes you want to go back and try again the next night. The problem was, stand-up comedy back then was brutal. This wasn't the era of podcasts and TikTok clips blowing comedians up overnight. Nobody cared about some broke kid doing open mics in tiny bars. Most nights I'd drive an hour just to perform after a guy reading depressing poetry about his childhood trauma while everyone snapped their fingers like we were in some artsy Netflix documentary. And somehow I convinced myself this was the path to greatness. After a couple years grinding open mics, I started reaching out to actual promoters and comics who booked real shows. Most ignored me. Some gave me pity spots. The gigs I did get were usually hours away, and almost none of them paid. I was basically losing money every time I performed, but I kept telling myself it'd eventually be worth it. Then one night, I got what felt like the opportunity of a lifetime. There was this comedy competition happening 5 hours away across state lines. First prize was $1,000, which to broke 20-something me sounded like winning the lottery. But honestly, I didn't even care about the money. The judges were actual working comedians, guys I'd seen on late-night television. Nothing huge, but legit comics making a living doing stand-up. To me, this was it. This was the moment somebody important was finally going to notice me. So naturally, I threw together my absolute best material, packed my garbage car, printed out MapQuest directions, like it was 2004, and hit the road way earlier than I needed to. Which turned out to be the only smart decision I made that entire day. Because my car was a complete disaster. I'm talking check engine light permanently on. Weird rattling noises. Tires that probably should have been replaced years earlier. And my phone useless. Half the time it barely got service outside my hometown. Every road trip felt like gambling with my life. Still, I didn't care. I was too focused on rehearsing jokes in my head and imagining myself absolutely crushing this competition. I kept practicing punchlines while driving through endless farmland and empty backroads. Mile after mile of absolutely nothing. No cities. No traffic. Just open land and long stretches of road that made you feel like you were driving off the edge of the earth. And somewhere during all that, I missed a turn. At first, I didn't panic. Getting lost was basically part of my personality at that point. But after another 30 or 40 minutes of driving through roads that definitely did not look familiar, that little pit in my stomach started growing. Then, I saw the town. And town honestly feels generous. The place looked like one of those forgotten little towns you only see in horror movies right before something terrible happens. There couldn't have been more than a handful of buildings total. An old gas station, A couple houses that looked like they were barely standing, rusted out trucks sitting in yards, broken fences. Everything had this faded gray look to it, like the entire place had been slowly rotting for decades. And the weirdest part, there was almost no movement. No kids outside, no music, no traffic, nothing. Just a few people standing near the gas station watching me drive in. I remember thinking they looked exhausted, like life had beaten the hell out of them. Dirty clothes, tired faces, hollow expressions, not homeless exactly, just worn down. But the second I pulled up, every one of them stopped what they were doing and stared directly at me. Not curious staring either. Predatory staring. Like I didn't belong there. I tried brushing it off because I was desperate to figure out where the hell I was. So I got out, walked up to them, and asked if I was anywhere near the road I needed. The conversation was awkward immediately. One guy just kept looking me up and down without saying anything. Another dude answered in these short little sentences like I was annoying him just by existing there. I even tried making a joke to lighten the mood, which usually worked for me, but nobody laughed. They just kept staring at me with these blank expressions that made my skin crawl. Finally, one of them pointed down the road and told me I missed a turn miles back, but if I kept driving straight for a while, eventually I'd hit the road I needed. Simple enough. I thanked them, probably a little too quickly, and decided to fill up my gas tank before heading back out. And that's when things started feeling genuinely wrong. While I was pumping gas, I noticed they were still staring at me. All of them, not talking, not moving around, just standing there completely still. I counted at least 4 people watching me in silence, and I know this sounds dramatic, but there was something dead behind their eyes. No emotion, no curiosity, just these cold, empty stares locked onto me the entire time. It made my stomach tighten up. You know that feeling when your brain is trying to warn you about something before you consciously understand it? That's exactly what this felt like. The whole situation suddenly felt off. I finished pumping gas faster than I probably should have, jumped back in my car, and got the hell out of there. The second I left town, I actually started laughing to myself because the interaction had been so bizarre. I even started thinking maybe I could turn it into material for my set later that night. Like imagine opening with, "Man, I just stopped in a town where everybody looked like they were legally dead." At the time, it genuinely felt funny now. Not so much. About 20 minutes later, a beat-up white pickup truck came flying past me out of nowhere. Thing looked like it was held together with duct tape and bad decisions. It blew by me so fast the whole car shook a little, but I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? It was getting close to dusk by then, and the farther I drove, the emptier everything became. No houses, no gas stations, no signs of civilization at all, just endless woods on both sides of the road. And that bad feeling started creeping back into my chest again. Then suddenly, bang. The sound exploded underneath my car so loudly I almost lost control of the wheel. The steering wheel jerked so hard I thought I was about to flip the car. I slammed on the brakes and fought to keep the thing from sliding off the road. The entire front end of the car felt wrong instantly, like I was driving on pure metal. Somehow I managed to pull onto the shoulder without crashing, but my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears at first. I figured it was just one blown tire. Annoying. Absolutely. But not the end of the world. Then I got out and looked at the front of the car. Both front tires were completely destroyed. Not flat, destroyed. The rubber looked shredded open like somebody had attacked them with a knife. I crouched down with my phone light trying to figure out what the hell happened, and that's when I saw them. Nails, several nails jammed deep into both tires. I just froze there for a second staring at them, because there's a huge difference between bad luck and something intentional. And deep down I already knew which one this was. I quickly grabbed my phone and tried calling for help, but of course the service was garbage. One bar kept appearing and disappearing. I managed to start a call with a tow company, but the second they asked where I was, I realized I had absolutely no idea. No road signs. No landmarks. Nothing. I hung up frustrated and sat back inside the car trying to think clearly. Weirdly enough, I wasn't even fully scared yet. Mostly angry. Angry that I was going to miss this competition. Angry that my car was trash. Angry that I got lost because I was too lazy to double-check directions. I called one of my friends and tried describing everything I remembered from the drive. The tiny town, the gas station, the road. He said he'd try looking at a map and call me back. So now I was stranded, middle of nowhere. Pitch black outside, and getting colder by the minute. I kept debating whether I should stay inside the car or try walking back toward that creepy little town. But every instinct told me staying put was smarter. At least inside the car I could lock the doors, so I waited, and slowly reality started sinking in. I wasn't making the show. The opportunity I'd hyped up in my head for weeks, gone. I leaned back in the seat, staring through the windshield, feeling absolutely miserable, when suddenly I noticed headlights appear behind me in the distance. At first, I actually felt relieved. I figured maybe it was a cop or another driver stopping to help. But the lights stopped far behind my car and just stayed there. Didn't move, didn't honk, didn't flash their beams. Just sat there shining directly at me. Minutes passed. The lights never moved, and after a while that relief started turning into anxiety. Because the longer those headlights stayed there, the weirder it became. Then slowly, very slowly, the vehicle started creeping closer. I remember gripping the steering wheel, watching the rearview mirror while those bright lights crawled toward me inch by inch. The glare was so intense I still couldn't make out what kind of vehicle it was. And right as it got close enough to park directly behind me, another pair of headlights appeared up ahead, coming toward me fast. My stomach dropped instantly. One vehicle behind me, one vehicle in front of me, and suddenly I understood something horrifying. This wasn't random. The vehicle coming from the front stopped so close to my car I thought it was going to hit me. Its headlights flooded the inside of my car, completely blinding me for a second. Between the glare in front of me and the lights behind me, I felt trapped inside this little bubble of white light in the middle of nowhere. And then I recognized the truck, that same beat-up white pickup from earlier. My chest tightened instantly. Before I could even process what was happening, bam, something slammed hard against my driver's side window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Standing outside my door was one of the men from the gas station. The exact same guy, and up close. He looked even worse than I remembered. Dirt all over his clothes, hollow eyes, face twitching slightly like he was barely holding himself together. He immediately started yanking on my car door handle violently. Thankfully, it was locked, but he kept pulling harder and harder like he was trying to rip the door off the frame. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted through the glass. No response, just heavy breathing and violent jerking on the handle. Then another man appeared at the passenger side. Now both of them were trying to get into the car at the same time. Panic hit me like a freight train. I started yelling at them to back away, but it honestly felt like they either couldn't understand me or just didn't care. They weren't talking normally. Just grunting, breathing hard, smashing their palms against the windows and doors. And then something happened that still gives me chills thinking about it. The guy at my window suddenly stopped, completely stopped. He just stood there staring directly at me through the glass, motionless. That same dead-eyed expression from the gas station, and for a second, everything went weirdly quiet. Then, without warning, he started screaming, not yelling, not talking, screaming. This horrible, animalistic howl right in my face that echoed through the entire road and woods around us. I swear my blood ran cold. And somehow that scream snapped me out of freezing up, because in that moment I realized something very simple. If I stayed in that car, I was dead. I don't know what these people wanted, and honestly I still don't want to know, but nothing about them felt normal. The way they moved, the staring, the screaming. It was like dealing with people who had completely detached from reality. So I made a split-second decision. I shoved my driver's side door open with every ounce of force I had. The door slammed into the screaming guy hard enough to knock him backward onto the ground, and I took off running immediately, straight into the woods. Branches smacked against my face while I sprinted through the darkness. I could barely see where I was going. My lungs were burning almost instantly, but adrenaline completely took over. Then suddenly another thought hit me. If I kept running deep into those woods blindly, I could get lost forever out there. So instead, after only a few feet into the tree line, I dropped flat to the ground behind some brush and stayed completely still. And somehow, it worked. Seconds later, I heard multiple footsteps charging past me deeper into the forest. They thought I kept running. I could hear them crashing through branches farther and farther away while I lay there barely breathing. Terrified, one of them would suddenly notice me hiding nearby. It felt like hours. Realistically, it was probably less than a minute. But once the footsteps faded enough, I slowly lifted my head and realized something unbelievable. My car was still sitting there. Doors open, engine off, and nobody near it. I didn't even think. The second I realized they'd all chased into the woods, I got up and sprinted back toward the car as quietly and quickly as possible. Every second felt dangerous. I kept expecting one of them to suddenly appear out of the darkness and tackle me onto the road. But somehow, nobody did. The driver's side door was still hanging open from when I slammed it into that guy. My backpack was sitting in the passenger seat untouched, and somehow my terrible little cell phone was still there too. I grabbed both immediately. For one stupid second, I actually considered trying to start the car again before realizing both front tires were still shredded beyond repair. So instead, I ran. Straight down the road, pitch black road, no streetlights, nothing but woods on both sides. I stayed low while running because I was convinced they were still out there somewhere watching me. Every sound behind me made my heart jump. Every crack of a branch sounded like footsteps, and the entire time, I kept hearing that scream in my head, that horrible screaming. I've heard drunk people yell. I've heard angry people scream. This wasn't that. It sounded completely unhinged, like pure rage mixed with excitement. Honestly, the sound alone was enough to haunt me for years afterward. I ran for what felt like forever. Eventually, my legs started giving out. My lungs were on fire, and I remember thinking I might actually collapse in the middle of the road. That's when I finally saw headlights approaching in the distance, and I almost didn't wave them down. That's how paranoid I was by that point. I genuinely thought it could be them again, but as the car got closer, I realized it was just one vehicle, and honestly, I didn't have another option. So I stumbled into the road waving both arms like a lunatic. Thankfully, the driver stopped. It was a woman probably in her late 40s or early 50s, and I must have looked absolutely insane standing there covered in dirt and sweat breathing like I'd just escaped prison. The craziest part, she was unbelievably calm. Most people would have locked the doors and driven off immediately, but she rolled the window down and asked if I was okay. The second I started trying to explain what happened, she told me to get in the car. To this day, I still think about how lucky I was that she stopped, because if she didn't, I honestly don't know what would have happened to me out there. She let me sit inside while she called the police, and I remember shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone when officers finally arrived. I told them everything: the town, the truck, the nails in my tires, the men trying to break into my car. But almost immediately, I could tell they weren't fully buying it. And honestly, looking back, I get why. By the time police got there, those people were gone. My car was old and beat up already. The dents on the door didn't exactly scream attempted kidnapping. There wasn't much evidence besides the destroyed tires. One officer even implied maybe I accidentally drove over nails somewhere. Yeah, both front tires at the exact same time. Sure, to make things even worse, because life apparently wanted to clown me one final time. The cops noticed my car wasn't properly inspected or insured. So after nearly getting murdered in the woods, I got handed tickets. I remember actually laughing when they gave them to me because the whole situation felt so unbelievably ridiculous. I never made it to the comedy competition, never found out who those people really were, never understood why they targeted me specifically. But I know one thing for sure: those nails in my tires were not an accident, and whatever those people planned on doing to me that night, I'm lucky I never found out. Last summer, 3 girls set out on what was supposed to be the ultimate healing trip. You know, the type of trip people post on Instagram with captions like "finding ourselves" and "main character energy." Long drives through the countryside, cheap drinks in random small towns, sleeping under the stars, taking artsy photos next to abandoned buildings. Yeah, that's what we thought this was going to be too. Instead, it turned into one of the most horrifying experiences of my entire life. And honestly, I still don't feel completely normal after what happened. For a little context, I am not a spontaneous person whatsoever. I'm the kind of person who plans things down to embarrassing detail. I make lists for my lists. Every vacation I've ever taken had color-coded schedules, backup plans, emergency contacts, the whole thing. My friends used to joke that I'd probably prepare a PowerPoint presentation before ordering food at a restaurant. That's just how my brain works. So when my boyfriend of 5 years and I broke up in late June, it completely wrecked me. And not one of those clean movie breakups either. It was messy, emotional, exhausting, the kind where you keep checking your phone even though you know you shouldn't. Thankfully, around the same time, my friend Sarah had also just gone through a breakup. Weirdly enough, us both being miserable at the exact same time helped a lot. We spent weeks hanging out, venting, drinking wine, talking trash about our exes, crying, laughing. Honestly, just trying to survive heartbreak together. Then our friend Alyssa came in with the most Alyssa idea imaginable: a cross-country road trip. Now Alyssa was the complete opposite of me. That girl basically lived like a character from some indie adventure movie. She was constantly traveling, constantly meeting random people, constantly finding weird hidden places in the middle of nowhere. She'd sleep outside with zero hesitation and somehow always looked like she was having the time of her life doing it. Meanwhile, Sarah and I thought staying at a motel without good Wi-Fi was roughing it. So normally, I would have shut the whole idea down immediately. But something about that moment in life made me say yes. Maybe I needed distraction. Maybe I wanted freedom. Or maybe I was just tired of feeling sad all the time. Either way, a few weeks later, the 3 of us hit the road together. And honestly, at first, it was incredible. The first day was a little stressful for me because Alyssa didn't believe in detailed plans. She liked figuring things out as we go, which for me felt psychologically violent. But after a couple days, I started loosening up. And for the first time in months, I actually felt happy again. We drove through tiny towns, hiked scenic trails, drank in random dive bars, met strangers we'd never see again, and laughed constantly. Every day felt like something out of a road trip movie. Then one afternoon, while driving through the middle of nowhere, we saw the barn. And something about it immediately felt wrong. The barn looked like it had been abandoned for 100 years. It sat way off the road, surrounded by overgrown weeds and dead-looking fields, like nature had slowly swallowed the entire property whole. The wood was faded, almost gray from age, parts of the roof were collapsing inward, and vines wrapped around the building so heavily it looked like they were the only thing keeping it standing. No cars, no lights, no signs of life whatsoever. Just this massive rotting barn sitting alone in the middle of nowhere. The second Alyssa saw it, she lost her mind. "Oh my God, we have to check that out." Sarah immediately looked interested too, but I shut it down right away. Absolutely not. And honestly, it wasn't even really about trespassing. That was just the excuse I gave. The real reason was because I listened to way too many true crime podcasts, and every survival instinct in my body was screaming that this place looked like the opening scene of a murder documentary. I kept imagining some deranged guy living inside the walls waiting for idiots like us to wander in. But Alyssa wouldn't let it go. She kept insisting the place was obviously abandoned. No tire tracks, no smoke, no movement, nothing. And to be fair, she was probably right. The property looked completely dead. Still, I refused. Eventually, after a few minutes of arguing, Alyssa gave up and we continued the trip. At least temporarily, because over the next week, that stupid barn somehow became Alyssa's obsession. Every couple hours she'd bring it up again. "Come on, it'll be fun. You guys are so paranoid. We're probably never going to pass through here again." And slowly, she started wearing us down. The rest of the trip honestly felt amazing. We saw beautiful places all across the country. Alyssa somehow always found these hidden spots normal tourists never knew existed. We slept on a mountain one night under a sky packed with stars. We danced in tiny bars with strangers. We took dumb, blurry photos we still laugh about now. For a little while, life actually felt simple again. Then one afternoon, while driving back toward civilization, Alyssa casually announced she knew exactly how to get back to the barn. And somehow, this time, I agreed. I don't know if it was the freedom of the trip changing me a little or just Alyssa slowly breaking down my resistance for days straight, but suddenly the idea didn't seem as scary anymore. I told her as long as the place still looked abandoned, we could check it out. Huge mistake. Around 4:30 a.m. in the afternoon, we spotted it again. The closer we got, the creepier it looked. Alyssa parked the SUV several yards away instead of directly near the barn, joking that we should probably avoid parking next to the serial killer's house. At the time, we laughed. Now that joke makes me sick. The second we got out of the SUV, Alyssa practically sprinted toward the barn doors like a kid running into Disneyland. Meanwhile, Sarah and I followed behind much slower, and the second we stepped inside, the entire atmosphere changed. The inside of the barn was somehow even creepier than the outside. Everything smelled old and damp like wet wood and rust. Dust floated through the air anytime we moved, and every little sound echoed through the building. The whole place creaked constantly, too. Not little normal house creaks either. Deep groaning sounds like the structure was struggling to stay standing. At one point, the wood above us shifted so loudly I genuinely thought the roof was about to collapse. Alyssa, of course, loved every second of it. She was taking pictures nonstop while Sarah and I slowly wandered around looking at all the junk left behind. And honestly, some of it didn't even look like farming equipment. At least not modern farming equipment. There were these huge rusted metal tools hanging on the walls that looked medieval: chains, hooks, weird sharp-looking objects. I remember joking nervously that it looked less like a barn and more like a torture chamber. Nobody laughed at that one. The weirdest part was how untouched everything felt. Usually abandoned places have signs that other people explored them before. Graffiti, trash, beer cans, something. But not here. It genuinely felt frozen in time, like nobody had stepped foot inside for years. Eventually, Alyssa wanted to check out the farmhouse connected to the barn. By that point, I was already committed to the adventure, so I didn't argue anymore. Honestly, I was starting to get into it too. The farmhouse door was warped shut so badly that we literally had to force it open. The second the door cracked inward, this horrible stale smell poured out from inside. Like trapped air that hadn't escaped in forever, we stepped inside carefully using our phone flashlights, and somehow the house felt sadder than scary. It was almost completely empty. No furniture, no decorations, nothing personal left behind. Just dust-covered floors and peeling walls. Except for one thing. A small green wooden table sitting in the middle of one room with a matching green chair beside it. That was it. For some reason, that image still sticks with me the most. Just one lonely chair sitting there in silence like someone had gotten up one day and never come back. I remember standing there imagining the family that probably used to live there. Farmers, kids maybe. Holidays, normal life, and now the entire place was just rotting away forgotten in the middle of nowhere. It felt eerie, but also weirdly fascinating. We spent hours exploring, talking, taking photos, and joking around, and without realizing it, time flew by fast. By the time we finally checked the clock, it was already close to 7 at night. That's when Alyssa made the suggestion that changed everything. We should stay here tonight. At first, I laughed because I thought she was kidding. She wasn't. Sarah immediately started considering it too, which honestly shocked me. A week earlier, both of us would have called this the dumbest idea imaginable. But something about the freedom of the trip had changed us a little. Everything felt exciting. Danger felt exciting. And looking back, that's probably the scariest part of all. Because we ignored every survival instinct we had just because we wanted one more fun memory before going home. So eventually, I said yes too. We grabbed sleeping bags and supplies from the SUV, ate sandwiches from the cooler, drank a couple beers, and spent the rest of the night hanging out inside that abandoned farmhouse. Like it was some quirky little Airbnb. By around 9 p.m. we were exhausted. We set alarms for 6 in the morning, climbed into our sleeping bags, and slowly drifted off to sleep. And for a few hours, everything was completely normal. Until sometime around 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of someone shushing us. At first, I thought I imagined it. I was still half asleep, laying there in my sleeping bag staring into the darkness while my brain tried catching up to reality. The room was almost pitch black except for faint moonlight leaking through the vines covering the windows. And somewhere in that darkness, I swear I heard someone go shish, soft, quiet, right near us. I slowly pushed myself up and looked around the room. Sarah and Alyssa were both still asleep. The farmhouse was completely still. No movement. No voices. Nothing. I convinced myself one of them had probably snored weirdly or something. So eventually I laid back down and shut my eyes again. Then, bang. The sound exploded through the house so loudly I felt it in my chest. It came directly from the front door, not knocking, not tapping. A full-force slam like somebody had thrown their entire body against it. And instantly every bit of sleep disappeared from my body. Sarah and Alyssa shot awake too. All three of us just stared at each other, frozen in complete silence. Nobody even spoke at first because we were all listening for another sound. Then we heard it. Tap, 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 tiny little taps against the window on the other side of the room at the exact same time. Bang, another violent hit against the door. Every hair on my body stood up. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't wind. There were people outside. And whoever they were, they knew we were inside. All three of us huddled together near the wall, trying to process what the hell to do. It's easy to imagine yourself being brave in situations like this until it actually happens. In reality, fear kind of locks your brain up. Nobody wanted to move. Nobody wanted to make noise. Then suddenly, the banging stopped. Complete silence filled the room for maybe 2 seconds. And then the front door slowly pushed inward. I remember my stomach dropping instantly. 3 people walked inside. 2 men, 1 woman. All painfully thin. Late 30s maybe, dirty clothes, hollow faces, and the creepiest part was how calm they were. They didn't rush us, didn't yell, didn't attack immediately. They just slowly walked into the room and stood there staring at us, and somehow that was worse. Sarah panicked first and screamed. The second she screamed, one of the men screamed back at her. Exactly like her, same pitch, same energy, like he was mocking her fear. The woman immediately started shushing us over and over again while the man in the middle began making these weird hand gestures like some kind of silent mime performance. That's when I noticed all 3 of them were holding masks, and slowly, they put them on. I still can't fully describe how disturbing those masks looked. One man wore this giant purple cube over his entire head. No face painted on it, no expression, just a massive purple cube. The second guy had this homemade Batman-looking mask made out of what honestly looked like cardboard and tape. And the woman, God, hers was the worst. It looked almost medical. But hanging from both sides were these long plastic icicle decorations like tusks dangling from her face. The room suddenly felt unreal, like we weren't dealing with normal people anymore. And then they started moving toward us. Slowly, 1 step at a time. The closer they got, the more terrified we became, and somehow our fear seemed to make them excited. Every time one of us cried or screamed, they'd react to it. The guy with the cardboard Batman mask started making these irritated growling noises while the woman kept shushing us aggressively like we were misbehaving children. Meanwhile, the man with the giant purple cube mask just kept staring at us silently while slowly inching closer. It felt less like dealing with people and more like dealing with something pretending to be human. I remember my brain trying desperately to make sense of the situation. Were they homeless people living there? Drug addicts? Some kind of weird cult? Nothing about them felt normal. And the scariest part was how coordinated they seemed without barely speaking. The woman suddenly lunged forward and grabbed my shoulders hard enough to hurt. But because she was so thin, pure adrenaline let me shove her backward onto the floor. The second she fell, both masked men snapped their attention toward her. That tiny distraction probably saved our lives. The guy with the purple cube mask suddenly shouted at me that I was gonna pay for that, and hearing actual words come out of him somehow made the whole thing even scarier. Because, up until that point, they felt almost inhuman. That's when Sarah remembered she had pepper spray attached to her keychain. And thank God she did. Without warning, she ripped it out and sprayed wildly toward all three of them. Instant chaos. The screaming started instantly. All three of them staggered backward yelling while covering their faces. The spray filled the air around us too, burning my eyes and throat immediately. But we didn't care, we ran, straight past them. The woman grabbed my ankle while I passed her on the floor, and for one horrifying second I thought she was going to pull me down. But I kicked free hard enough to break loose. As I stumbled toward the door, I looked back one last time, and I swear this image still shows up in my nightmares. The woman was reaching behind her waistband for something. I didn't stay to see what it was. All three of us sprinted across the field toward the SUV as fast as humanly possible while those people screamed behind us inside the farmhouse. And the weirdest part, they never chased us, at least not physically. They stayed inside screaming while we scrambled into the vehicle, practically crying and choking from the pepper spray fumes still burning our eyes. Alyssa jumped into the driver's seat. Sarah slammed the locks down immediately, and within seconds we were flying down that dirt path away from the farmhouse. Nobody spoke for probably 5 straight minutes. We were all too panicked to even process what had just happened. Eventually, Sarah started crying. Alyssa looked completely pale, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. And me, I just kept staring out the back window, expecting headlights to appear behind us at any second, but they never did. We made it back home faster than any point during the trip. No sightseeing, no stopping, no more adventure. The entire mood of the trip completely died that night. And honestly, we never even reported it. Partly because we technically trespassed. Partly because we had no idea who those people were, but mostly because none of us wanted to relive it. The thing that still bothers me most isn't even the masks. It's the fact that those people seemingly came out of nowhere. We explored that property for hours earlier that day. There were no footprints, no food, no vehicles, no sign anyone had been living there. Nothing. So where did they come from? And how long were they watching us before we realized we weren't alone? A few years ago, my girlfriend and I decided to take a road trip across the United States together. At the time, it honestly felt like one of those perfect moments in life where everything is finally going right. We'd been together for years. We both loved traveling, and secretly, I already knew this trip was going to change our lives forever. Because somewhere during that trip, I planned on proposing to her. And eventually, I did. She's my wife now. But whenever we talk about that road trip today, the proposal isn't the first thing either of us remembers anymore. Because one of the happiest experiences of our lives became tied to something absolutely terrifying. For a little backstory, I owned a truck with a pretty large cargo bed, and instead of setting up tents every night, we threw an air mattress in the back, and basically turned the truck into our little mobile campsite. Honestly, it was perfect. I hated traditional camping as a kid. Setting up tents always sucked, sleeping on the ground sucked, and waking up sore every morning sucked even more. Sleeping in the truck bed felt like camping for people who still enjoyed comfort. Every night we'd park somewhere beautiful, climb into the back, and fall asleep staring up at the sky. And let me tell you something, if you've never seen the stars way out in the wilderness far from cities and light pollution, you are seriously missing out. It doesn't even look real. The sky feels endless. The trip itself was amazing. We spent days hiking through mountains, stopping in tiny towns, exploring forests, eating terrible gas station snacks, and basically acting like two obnoxiously happy people in love. The only issue, my girlfriend was an unbelievably light sleeper, and I mean unbelievably. A twig snapping 50 feet away could wake her up instantly. Wind through trees. Awake, random bird sounds. Awake one night, a raccoon knocked something over near the truck and she practically levitated off the mattress. But honestly, it wasn't nature itself that scared her. It was bears. She had this intense fear of them after hearing some story from a coworker about a bear attack during a camping trip years earlier. After that, every little noise outside became definitely a bear in her mind. Meanwhile, I kept trying to reassure her that we were probably more likely to get killed by bad gas station sushi than a bear attack. Usually that got a laugh out of her. Usually about 3/4 of the way through the trip, I finally proposed. And somehow she actually said yes, still one of the greatest moments of my life. After weeks of carrying around the ring and stressing myself sick trying not to ruin the surprise, I finally got to relax. That night we celebrated, stayed up talking forever, and eventually fell asleep happier than we'd been the entire trip. At least I did. The next morning, I noticed immediately that she looked exhausted, like genuinely shaken. When I asked if she barely slept again because of bear paranoia, she hesitated in this weird way that instantly caught my attention. Then she told me something that changed the entire feeling of the trip. Sometime during the night, she thought she heard somebody walking around outside the truck. At first, I honestly didn't think much of it. Not because I thought she was lying, but because when you're camping out in the wilderness, your brain plays tricks on you constantly. Every sound feels amplified at night. Wind brushing against the truck can sound like footsteps if you're already anxious. But the way she described it made me pause a little. She said she woke up sometime in the middle of the night and heard slow footsteps circling around the truck. Not animal sounds, not branches snapping. Footsteps, crunching against dirt and gravel. She told me she stayed completely still because she was terrified to even look over the edge of the truck bed. Apparently every time she started drifting back to sleep, she'd hear movement again somewhere nearby. Then she said something that really unsettled me. She thought she heard someone mumbling. Quiet talking, like a person speaking softly to themselves outside in the dark. Even then, though, I tried staying rational. I told her it was probably just exhaustion mixed with paranoia from sleeping outside for so many nights in a row. I believed that's what she thought she heard, but I didn't necessarily believe somebody had actually been stalking around our campsite all night. At least not yet. Then, while we were packing up the next morning, she suddenly gasped near the truck. I walked over, and she pointed at the dirt beside the vehicle. There was a footprint, at least. Something that looked close enough to one. Small, human-shaped, fresh in the dirt. She immediately insisted it wasn't hers. I remember crouching down staring at it while trying to convince myself it could have been old, or maybe even from us arriving the night before. But honestly, the timing felt weird. Still, I didn't want to feed into her fear. So instead, I kept things calm and checked around the truck carefully before we left. No signs someone had been there. No missing supplies, no damage. Everything seemed fine. Well, almost everything. When I checked inside the truck cab, I noticed my planner sitting open on the back seat. And it was open directly to the page listing all the places we planned on stopping during the trip. That stopped me cold for a second, because I didn't remember leaving it out, but again, I rationalized it immediately. Maybe she looked through it yesterday. Maybe I forgot. Maybe it slid out while we were unpacking. There are a million ways your brain explains things when you don't want to admit something feels wrong. So I tossed the planner back into my bag and acted like nothing happened. And slowly throughout the day, things started feeling normal again. We grabbed coffee, drove through the mountains, hiked scenic trails, took photos together, laughed nonstop. Honestly, just acted like a newly engaged couple completely obsessed with each other. For a little while, the weirdness from the night before faded away, but I could still tell she wasn't fully relaxed anymore. Every now and then she'd glance behind us while hiking or look out toward the woods longer than normal. The fear wasn't really about bears now. It was people. That night was supposed to be our final evening sleeping outdoors before heading back home. I even offered to get a hotel because I could tell she was still uneasy. But she insisted we stay one last night in the truck bed because she didn't want fear ruining the trip. So we parked at another quiet wilderness spot and set everything up again. And this time, I decided I was staying awake. I didn't tell her I planned on staying awake all night. I figured if I admitted I was worried too, it would only make her anxiety worse. So instead, I acted completely normal while secretly deciding I was going to keep watch until she fell asleep. We climbed into the truck bed a little before midnight, and I could tell immediately she was struggling to relax. Every tiny sound outside made her tense up. The peaceful silence we'd loved the entire trip suddenly felt different now. Heavy, uncomfortable, like the woods were hiding something. Trying to distract her, I dug out this ancient portable 995 player I still had from high school and put on old episodes of Family Guy. It sounds ridiculous now, but honestly it helped. The stupid jokes and background noise kept her mind occupied long enough that she eventually stopped focusing on every little sound outside. Around midnight, she finally fell asleep beside me. I stayed awake a while longer listening to the woods around us. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices. Eventually, I started feeling stupid for even taking the whole thing seriously. I shut off the 995 player, rolled over, and finally tried getting some sleep myself. That's when I heard it. Movement outside the truck, slow footsteps. My eyes opened instantly. At first I thought maybe it actually was a bear because whatever it was sounded heavier than a raccoon or some small animal. But something about the rhythm of the movement felt wrong, too controlled, too deliberate. I carefully crawled toward the edge of the truck bed and slowly lifted my head just enough to peek over, and I swear my entire body went cold. Someone was walking around the truck. A person, smaller build, wearing a hood, slowly circling the vehicle while mumbling to themselves. I immediately dropped back down before they could notice me watching. My heart was pounding so hard. I thought they'd hear it. And right then, about 1,000 thoughts hit my brain at once. Do I wake her up? Do I confront them? Do I stay quiet? Do they have a weapon? Are they alone? Because the scariest part wasn't even the person I could hear. It was the possibility there were more people hiding nearby waiting for me to make a mistake. I stayed perfectly still, listening carefully while the footsteps continued circling the truck. Every now and then I could hear clearer bits of the mumbling, and I realized something strange. The voice sounded female, a woman. At one point she walked close enough to the truck bed that I could actually see strands of blonde hair hanging out from under the hood. And somehow that made the situation even creepier. I decided the safest thing to do was create a plan before waking my fiancée. So as quietly as possible I pulled out my phone and typed a message into my notes app. Don't make a sound. Someone is outside the truck. I'll distract them. Take the keys, start the truck, and I'll jump back in. Then I slowly woke her up. The second her eyes opened, I held a finger to my mouth and showed her the phone screen. I watched confusion immediately turn into pure terror on her face. But thankfully, she stayed silent. I handed her the keys carefully while listening for movement outside, and then suddenly the footsteps stopped, completely. The silence was somehow worse than the footsteps, at least when I could hear the person moving around outside. I knew where they were. But now, nothing. No crunching gravel. No mumbling, no movement at all. It felt like whoever was out there was listening, waiting. I gripped my pocket knife so tightly my hands started cramping. Looking back, it was honestly pathetic protection against who knows what, but in that moment it was the only thing making me feel remotely in control. I leaned closer to the edge of the truck bed and listened one more time. Still nothing. That's when I decided I needed to force the situation before we got trapped waiting there all night. My plan was simple. Jump out fast, scare whoever it was away, buy my fiancée enough time to start the truck and get us out of there immediately, at least. That was the plan. I took one deep breath and jumped out of the truck bed. Nobody was there. I spun around, quickly scanning the darkness around the vehicle, but the entire campsite looked empty. Trees, dirt, darkness. That was it. For one stupid second, I actually thought maybe I imagined the whole thing too. Then my fiancée whispered from the truck bed, "Are you okay?" And the second I turned toward her, pain exploded through my ankle. Something slammed into my leg so hard I collapsed instantly. I hit the dirt screaming while this figure suddenly crawled out from underneath the truck. Underneath it. The woman had been hiding under the truck the entire time, waiting for me to step down beside her. Before I could even react, she swung a thick tree branch at me again. I threw my arms up just in time to block part of the hit, but the impact still rattled through my entire body. Then she started screaming, not yelling words, just wild, erratic screaming while charging toward me. I scrambled backward, trying to get away while she hurled the branch aside and pulled out a knife. It looked like some kind of kitchen knife, and she started slashing it around recklessly while advancing toward me. At that point, survival instincts completely took over. I kept backing away from the truck, intentionally trying to draw her farther from my fiancée, because I realized something horrifying. This woman wasn't trying to rob us. She wanted to hurt us. Badly. Once I felt we were far enough away from the truck, I screamed at my fiancée to start the engine immediately. That finally snapped her into motion. She jumped from the truck bed, sprinted to the driver's door, and climbed inside while the woman suddenly whipped around toward her. The second, the engine roared to life. The woman changed targets completely and sprinted toward the truck. For a horrifying moment, I thought she was going to reach the door before it locked. But my fiancée threw the truck into gear instantly and tore forward, kicking up a massive cloud of dirt and dust. The woman stumbled backwards, screaming. Then something happened I'll never forget. My fiancée suddenly slammed the brakes, spun the truck around, and drove directly back toward us, straight toward the woman. The woman barely dove out of the way in time. And as her hood finally flew off, I saw her face, and my entire body went numb, because I knew exactly who she was. It was my ex-girlfriend, For a second, my brain genuinely refused to process what I was looking at. Because this wasn't just some random attacker hiding in the woods. This was somebody I used to love, somebody I hadn't seen in years. And somehow, that made everything infinitely more terrifying. The hood had fallen back enough for me to clearly see her face in the truck headlights. She looked completely different from the person I remembered. Pale, exhausted, wild-eyed, like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. But it was absolutely her, and suddenly all these old memories came rushing back at once. Our breakup years earlier had been awful. Not toxic in the normal we hate each other kind of way either. It was worse than that. Obsessive, unstable. Toward the end of the relationship, she started showing up outside my apartment randomly in the middle of the night. Sometimes she'd just sit in her car watching the building. Other times she'd leave long emotional messages talking about how we were meant to be together forever. Eventually things got bad enough that I actually had to involve the police. That was 6 years before this trip. 6 years. And somehow she had still found me. Standing there on that dirt road watching her cry in the headlights felt completely surreal. Part of me almost pitied her for a split second. Then I remembered the knife. The fact she'd been hiding underneath our truck waiting to attack us. Whatever sympathy I had disappeared instantly. My fiancée pulled up beside me, threw the passenger door open, and yelled for me to get in. I didn't hesitate. The second I climbed inside, she slammed the gas and we got the hell out of there. I kept looking back, expecting my ex to chase after us somehow, but she didn't move. She just stayed kneeling there in the dirt crying while the truck disappeared down the road. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. The adrenaline crash hit hard. My ankle was throbbing from where she hit me. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. And my fiancée looked like she was trying not to completely fall apart. Eventually, once we finally got cell service again, I called the police and explained everything. And honestly, the craziest part of the story came afterward. A few days later, police found her back at her house like nothing happened. She didn't even deny what she did. Apparently, she admitted everything almost immediately. And according to the officers, she said something that still chills me to this day. She admitted she wanted to kill my fiancé. When they asked if she wanted to hurt me too, she just cried. The last update I ever got was that she was placed in some kind of institution for psychiatric treatment. I don't know how long she stayed there or where she is now, and frankly, I don't want to know. My wife still occasionally searches her name online just to make sure she hasn't resurfaced somewhere nearby, but as far as we know, she's completely disappeared, hopefully forever. What scares me most isn't even the attack itself anymore. It's realizing how close we came to dying because of someone we thought was long gone from our lives. Sometimes the people you should fear most aren't strangers in the woods. Sometimes they're the people who already know everything about you.